So, as I mentioned, we'll make sure that the negotiations continues. Canada is the only country on earth, along with China, that has imposed so many counter tariffs. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah.
Today marks a significant milestone in our partnership with the launch of the new Canada-EU Industry Policy Dialogue. Together, we have pledged to deepen cooperation across these critical sectors. Our defense industries, including aerospace, marine, and tech, will be better aligned and will benefit from deeper cooperation in order that we fully recognize that peace and security are the foundation of lasting prosperity. We will develop closer supply chain, particularly in vital areas such as energy and critical minerals, and by building resilient and sustainable supply networks, we will protect not only our economic security on the EU side and on the Canadian side, but also our economies from disruption, and ultimately we will protect jobs together. Innovation lies at the core of our agenda, and through our collaboration, we will enhance manufacturing capabilities by leveraging breakthrough technologies such as quantum computing and AI. And finally, we will join our efforts in industrial decarbonization, including pioneering initiatives in green steel and green aluminum. In response to global health crisis, we are strengthening cooperation on vaccine research, manufacturing, and supply because we believe in science and we believe that our health, the health of our citizens, is at the foundation of our prosperity. So it's really, really a pleasure to have you here, my dear Stéphane. Looking forward to working very, very closely with you. My goal is to make sure that within the end of the summer, I will be going to Europe and continue to implement the action plan that we've been working on, because as I said in French, there's an emergency, and so therefore we're in action mode. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Minister Joly. I'm wondering what your reaction is to Donald Trump's latest tariff threat.
So thank you. Of course, we take good note of the comments made by the President. And of course, we'll let the Prime Minister continue his negotiations and will not negotiate in public. These has been the answers that I've been giving to every single question since the beginning of the negotiations. What I wanted to emphasize today is, as Minister in charge of industries and of the economy, is we are not alone in this world. We need to be closer to our allies. And that is why today is so important. It's been only 15 days that the Prime Minister signed an agreement with the EU to make sure that not only, of course, that we have free trade agreement, but that we are very closely aligned on defense and on all our industrial policies. And that's why Stéphane and I today are together, because we're in solution mode and we're trying to make sure that ultimately, while the US is becoming weaker, we will become stronger and we will diversify and turn ourselves towards Europe.
We saw the Prime Minister push the deadline for these negotiations to August 1st. I'm wondering why that strategy and why not, for instance, more counter tariffs in this case?
So, as I mentioned, we'll make sure that the negotiations continues. Canada is the only country on earth, along with China, that has imposed so many counter tariffs. So we have had already a very strong response, and we want to make sure that while we are putting pressure on the American administration, that at the same time we're creating, well, first we're protecting jobs while creating jobs. And we're making sure that we're doing this economic diplomacy, which usually would not necessarily be the case in a normal world, but we're not in normal times. And economic diplomacy is more important than ever, and that's why we need to make sure that while the US is closing its market and really taking its own path regarding protectionism, that we, as a stable and democratic country, continue to have open markets, including with the EU. And that's my job. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, Minister. Your government ran on the promise of being elbows up and standing up for Canadians, but respectfully, that hasn't been happening. So do you think Canadians have been misled by the promises of your government?
I reject that premise. What I'm saying is, of course, we will make sure that we defend our workers. That has been at the core of everything we've been doing. But at the same time, we're dealing with a very unpredictable U.S. administration. We're not the only ones. That's the case for the EU, and I won't talk, of course, for my colleague Séjourné, but that's the case also for every single country on this planet. So my point is right now is that we need to make sure that we're in action mode, we're in solution mode with other countries, because we're not alone. And so that's why 15 days after the agreement that was signed between Prime Minister Carney and President von der Leyen, we're meeting here in Ottawa. And within the next week, so the end of the summer, I'll be going to Europe, because we need to make sure that our businesses, our industries in Canada, are able to have access to European markets, and same for European companies having access to Canada. And that's our goal. Because while the US will decide to undergo this protectionism path, we know that together we can be in favor of free and open markets, and that's also a really good way to negotiate.
Respectfully, Minister, there was no strong response, though, to, let's say, the increase of steel and aluminum tariffs. There was no strong response to the threat of copper tariffs incoming. Your government had to remove the DST simply just to get back to the negotiating table. So respectfully, what is the government actually doing to negotiate with the U.S. and stand up for Canadians?
Well, you know, you're pretty much asking the same question as your colleagues. My answer is always the same. We won't negotiate in public, and we'll let the Prime Minister negotiate. And, you know, it's a reality that pretty much all world leaders are dealing with right now. And of course, we're coordinating with the EU, we're coordinating with other countries that are negotiating. That's why economic diplomacy is so important right now. But fundamentally, while these negotiations are happening, we need to realign ourselves with trusted partners. And today, what you're seeing is a realignment between trusted partners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Minister. Given Trump's letter, you said you can change the tariffs.
I thought you had a question for my colleague Séjourné.
I might. You never know.
I thought that was Canadian hospitality, guys.
I might. Okay, so given Trump's letter saying he could change the tariffs depending on the relationship, how can you expect the government to negotiate with Trump and provide certainty to Canadian industry when the tariffs could change at any time?
My goal is to create certainty in a world that is very uncertain, in a world that is much more dangerous. That is the challenge of world leaders right now, of politicians that are in Stéphane and my role. And that's why being a minister in charge of the economy, in charge of industries is so important. Why? Because we're in a trade war. The battle is the economy, and our front lines right now are the tariff sectors, steel, aluminum, auto. Now, we're looking at copper, and we're taking note of what the President mentioned yesterday. But fundamentally, we can't stay idle. We won't keep our arms crossed, just looking at things and not be in solution mode. My focus, my priority has been to protect jobs. I'm very much aware that people in the tariff industries are very anxious. I understand that livelihoods are at stake. Meanwhile, while this is happening, we need to make sure that we're turning ourselves towards Europe, or turning ourselves also towards trusted partners in Asia. And that won't happen by fluke. It will happen because we're meeting, we're discussing, we're taking decisions, and then we're implementing them. And that's what you're seeing today in full force.
Maybe a question for both of you then.
Yeah.
Like you said, 10 European nations have not signed onto CETA.
Sorry, can you repeat?
10 European nations have not ratified CETA.
Yeah.
So you're putting a lot of emphasis on Europe and focus on Europe. Is that smart given that it's not fully implemented in Europe?
So I think what is really important is CETA is implemented. It is happening every single day. Every time you go to the grocery store, you can see so many European products. Every time you are in a sector, you know you can have access to the different jurisdictions in the EU, notwithstanding the fact that it's not been ratified by 10 of all the member states. But in order to make sure that there is truly a secure partnership, we need to make sure that implementation ratification is done, and that's why we need to make sure that these 10 countries are ratifying. So maybe, Stéphane, you want to add something?
He underlined this again in his comments today. I mean, what is your view currently on how this might help Canada actually accelerate a sector that's at the crossroads right now?
Well, you know, referring to critical minerals, what we're clearly seeing is that there's lots of interest from many countries, particularly countries from the European Union, looking to invest in Canada. And for years we've been looking for capital. For years we've been looking at investors to develop the potential of these great mines. And I'm really happy to see that finally it's happening. Why? Because also, we know that we can be part of this very secure supply chains for these very key critical minerals, which underpin our economic security. And while there's geopolitical tensions right now, we cannot have only one country in the world that is the source of critical minerals. We need to make sure that many others are able to develop the potential of critical minerals, and that's the case, actually, for Canada.
Very good. And could you define?
If I can add to that. So Stéphane was referring to critical minerals, but when we look at critical minerals, we see it link also to the defense sector. We have just signed a very important agreement with the EU about Rearm Europe, basically being able to have access to defense procurement from the EU, but also Canada being able to offer solutions to the Europeans when it comes to military procurement. Mm-hmm. Critical minerals is also part of that supply chain. Sure. So that's why it's really, really important, and it shows how much we need to be integrated, not only, of course, at the economic level, but also at the security level. It's all linked.
Okay, merci.
Yeah.
Last question.
Good afternoon, Minister Joly. David Baxter, Canadian Press.
Hi, David.
Before the back during the campaign, we heard Prime Minister Carney say 3 things will never be on the table in trade negotiations, one of which being supply management. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump taking aim at that once again in his letter. So is supply management still not going to be on the table? Well,
you know, the Prime Minister has said it. So, of course, this is a key commitment.
Perfect. And just with Canada trying to move away from the United States and getting more industrial sync with the European Union, yeah. Is there a potential risk in Canada being too closely tied to the EU when it comes to trade, especially with many forecasters saying they only expect moderate economic growth from the EU in the next few years?
What do you think about that? No, listen, I think that the EU is an important market. It is a market that has been able for us to participate in our growth. Stéphane was mentioning how much it is really benefiting both the EU and Canada. And at the time where the US is taking its own decisions, we need to make sure that ultimately, while there are forces that will push us towards protectionism, that we're not isolated. Canada is a trading nation. We have said it many, many times. We're 41 million people, but we're punching around over our weight when it comes to being able to offer what the world needs. But in order for us to be developing our economic potential, we need to have access to markets. And that's why the over-dependency on the US over the years has made sometimes our businesses not necessarily focus on looking elsewhere in diversifying. Now, I won't take decisions for our CEOs. My job is to open them paths to make sure that that diversification is easier. And that's why we need, as leaders, to make sure that we're creating these partnerships at the institution level, and then our businesses can follow suit, and then they can make sure that they do business with basically the European Union and the European countries. And I think that there's a lot of interest in the EU for Canada, and I think there's lots of interest right now in Canada for the EU. I think we're in really, the golden age that is starting between the EU and Canada. Thank you.
Bon. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. This concludes the press conference.